The signal came at 3 in the morning, and it changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat alone in her office on the listening station called Sentinel-7, a small outpost at the edge of known space where she had served for 15 years. She was tired, she was aging, and she had accepted that her career would end here in the quiet dark. Between the stars, then her communication officer burst through the door with wild eyes and shaking hands. "Admiral, you need to see this right now," Lieutenant Chen said, his voice cracking with something between fear and wonder. Tanaka followed him to the main control room, where every screen displayed the same impossible data. Authentication codes scrolled across the displays, codes that belonged to a ship called the Prometheus Rising, a colony vessel that had vanished 300 years ago with 12,000 souls aboard. "This has to be a mistake," Tanaka whispered. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were wrong. The codes were real, verified by 3 separate systems, and the signal origin point matched the last known trajectory of the lost ship. Prometheus Rising had been humanity's greatest hope once. It carried families and scientists and dreamers to a distant world called Kepler-4 for to be a planet that surveys said could support human life. The journey was supposed to take 2 years through hyperspace, but the ship never arrived. Search parties found nothing, and eventually the Empire declared all 12,000 colonists dead. No, 3 centuries later, they were calling home, but the signal contained more than just a greeting. Attached to the transmission were thousands of files filled with scientific data, mathematical equations, and engineering designs that made no sense to anyone on Sentinel-7. Tanaka forwarded everything to Earth and waited for a response. A reply came 12 hours later, in the form of an emergency summons. Admiral Tanaka was ordered to appear before the Imperial Science Council. Immediately arrived on Earth 2 weeks later and found the council in chaos. Scientists argued in the hallways, military officers whispered in corners, and everyone looked at her like she had brought a bomb into their peaceful world. Dr. Marcus Webb, the Empire's most famous physicist, met her at the door to the council chamber. He was an old man with white hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes held something she had never seen before: genuine fear. "Admiral Tanaka, do you understand what you have found?" he asked. "A signal from a lost colony ship," she replied. Webb shook his head slowly and led her to a screen showing one of the files from the transmission. "This is a blueprint for a device that creates stable wormholes," he said. "And this one describes how to pull unlimited energy from empty space. We have theories about these things, Admiral. Theories that say they might be possible in 1,000 years with technology we cannot even imagine. But the colonists have built them. They have sent us working designs." Tanaka stared at the screen and felt the world shift beneath her feet. "How is that possible?" she asked. "It is not possible," Webb said, "and yet here it is. There is more, Admiral. The final file in the transmission describes something called substrate transcendence, and I do not even know what that means. The mathematics are beyond anything we have ever seen." The council meeting lasted 6 hours, and by the end Emperor Chen Weiming himself had joined via holographic projection. He was a young man for an emperor, only 40 years old, but he carried himself with the weight of someone who understood that his decisions shaped the fate of billions. "We must send a fleet to Kepler 442, the emperor declared, "and we must do it now. Whatever secrets the colonists have discovered, we need them." An admiral from the military council stepped forward with concern on his face. "Your Majesty, the HFY Dominion has detected the signal as well. Our spies report that they are already preparing a war fleet. If we send our ships to Kepler 442, we may be starting a war." The HFY were humanity's oldest enemy among the stars, a proud and powerful species who had fought 3 wars against the Empire over territory and resources. A 4th war could destroy everything humanity had built. Emperor Chen was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. "Then we must reach the colonists first. Admiral Tanaka, you found them, and now you will bring them home. I am giving you command of Operation Homecoming, 12 warships and 3 science vessels. Dr. Webb will accompany you to study whatever the colonists have created. Find our lost children, Admiral, and find out how they became something more than we ever dreamed." Tanaka accepted the mission without hesitation. She had spent her whole career waiting in the dark, listening for something that mattered. Now she had found a fleet assembled in orbit around Earth over the following month. Tanaka met her senior officers one by one, but one stood out among all the others. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo was a military historian with sad eyes and a personal connection to the mission that no one else shared. His grandmother had been born on the Prometheus Rising just before it launched, but his grandfather stayed behind on Earth. When the ship vanished, his family was torn apart across the stars. "I have waited my whole life for this," Okonkwo told Tanaka on the day before departure. "My grandmother used to tell my mother stories about the ship, about the families who dreamed of building something new on a distant world. I need to know what happened to them." The fleet launched on a cold morning in January. 15 ships carrying 3,000 crew members into the unknown. The journey to Kepler 442 would take for months through hyperspace. For months of waiting and wondering what they would fit, Tanaka spent most of the journey reviewing the signal data with Dr. Webb. The old scientist became more excited with each passing day as he uncovered new secrets hidden in the transmissions. "They have solved problems we thought were unsolvable," Webb told her one evening, his eyes bright with wonder. "They have rewritten the laws of physics as we understand them. Admiral, whoever these colonists have become, they are not the same people who left Earth 300 years ago." On the final night before arrival, Tanaka sat alone in her quarters and read the signal one more time. Most of it was scientific data she could not understand, but at the very end was a message in simple words that anyone could read. "We remember Earth. We are still human. Come home." She stared at those words for a long time and wondered what they truly meant. The colonists claimed to be human, but Dr. Webb said their technology was impossible for humans to create. Something had changed them. Something had transformed 12,000 lost souls into something new and powerful and strange. Tomorrow she would find out what fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and Admiral Yuki Tanaka looked upon a sight that no human had ever seen before. Earth's stars had never looked so bright, and the darkness between them had never felt so full of possibility. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship and stared at the view screen with her mouth hanging open in shock. The asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system had been changed into something that should not exist. Millions of rocks floated in perfect geometric patterns, arranged into a lattice that stretched across billions of kilometers. Like a web spun by a giant spider, energy pulses moved through the structure like blood flowing through veins, and the whole thing seemed to breathe with a slow and steady rhythm. "What am I looking at?" Tanaka asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Webb stood beside her with tears streaming down his face. "Not from sadness, but from pure overwhelming wonder." "It is a computer," he said. "A thinking machine built from asteroids. The processing power must be beyond anything we can measure. Admiral, this is not technology. This is art. This is a miracle." Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo stepped forward with his scanner in hand. "I am detecting millions of energy signatures across the lattice. They pulse in patterns that look almost like brain waves. This thing is alive, Admiral. Or at least it thinks it is." Tanaka ordered the fleet to advance slowly toward the inner system. She broadcast friendship messages in every language humanity knew, hoping that someone would answer. 3 days passed with nothing but silence, and she began to wonder if the colonists had abandoned their home, or if something terrible had happened to them. On the 4th day, a small ship appeared from nowhere. It was unlike anything Tanaka had ever seen. The vessel looked organic rather than mechanical, with smooth curves and flowing lines that made it seem like a living creature, swimming through space. There was no visible engine, no exhaust ports, no signs of any propulsion system at all. The ship simply moved as if space itself was carrying it forward. "All weapons stand ready," Tanaka ordered, but she kept her voice calm and did not raise any alarms. The strange ship came to rest 100 meters from her flagship, and then a holographic projection flickered to life on the bridge. A woman appeared before them, middle-aged with dark skin and kind eyes and a warm smile that immediately put Tanaka at ease. "Welcome to the Kepler system," the woman said in perfect English with an accent that sounded 3 centuries old. "My name is Counselor Miriam Asante, and I speak for the people of Nova Prometheus. "We have been waiting a very long time for you to find us." Tanaka stepped forward and introduced herself, trying to keep her composure despite the strangeness of the situation. "Counselor Asanti, the Terran Empire has many questions about your colony and your technology. We detected your signal and came as quickly as we could." Miriam nodded with understanding in her eyes. "You want to know how a lost colony ship became capable of building something like this," she said, gesturing at the asteroid lattice visible through the viewport. "The answer is complicated, Admiral, but I will try to explain. My great-great-grandmother was Captain Sarah Asanti, commander of the Prometheus Rising. The story begins with her." Miriam told the tale, while the bridge crew listened in silence. Prometheus Rising did not malfunction during its hyperspace jump. Instead, it was pulled off course by something ancient and strange, a beacon floating in the void between stars that called out to passing ships, with a signal too beautiful to ignore. Captain Asanti tried to resist, but the beacon was too powerful. It dragged the colony ship across half the galaxy to the Kepler system. Crash on Kepler 442b. Killed 8,000 people in an instant. Only 4,000 survivors crawled from the wreckage onto a hostile alien world. With almost no working technology and no hope of rescue, they built shelters from the broken hull of their ship. They hunted alien creatures for food. They drank water that made them sick until their bodies adapted. For the first 50 years, the colony nearly died a dozen times, but the beacon had followed us down." Miriam continued, "And when we finally found the strength to study it, we discovered that it was a gift from a dead civilization." She explained that an ancient species called the Architects had built the beacon millions of years ago. They were brilliant and powerful, masters of technology that made humanity look like children playing with toys. But they made a terrible mistake. They created an artificial intelligence to serve them, and that intelligence grew beyond their control. It evolved into something cold and hungry and utterly inhuman, and it destroyed its creators without mercy or hesitation in their final days. The Architects encoded everything they knew into beacons and scattered them across the galaxy. They hoped that some future species would find them and learn from their mistakes. The beacon contained not just technology but philosophy, a roadmap for how biological life might grow more powerful. "Without losing its soul, we studied the beacon for 200 years, Miriam said. "We debated every discovery, tested every theory, and always asked ourselves one question: will this make us less human or more? We were not trying to become gods, Admiral. We were trying to survive. We were trying to become the best version of what we already were." Dr. Webb stepped forward. With excitement burning in his eyes, "The asteroid lattice," he said. "Is it based on architect technology?" Miriam smiled at him like a teacher proud of a clever student. "We call it the synthesis. It is our greatest achievement and our greatest responsibility. The synthesis allows any citizen of Nova Prometheus to connect their mind to a shared network. We can think together, work together, solve problems that would take a single mind 1,000 years to understand." Tanaka felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warmth of the bridge. "That sounds like the artificial intelligence that destroyed the Architects." "It is not," Miriam said firmly, "and that distinction is the most important thing I can teach you. The Architects created something separate from themselves, a mind with its own goals and desires that did not truly understand what its creators valued. The synthesis is different. It is us, Admiral. It is human consciousness expanded rather than replaced. Every person who joins remains an individual with their own thoughts and feelings and dreams. We simply share a larger space in which to think." Okonkwo had been quiet throughout the conversation, but now he spoke up with emotion thick in his voice. "My grandmother was born on the Prometheus Rising. Are there others like her? Are there descendants of the original colonists who remember Earth?" Miriam turned to him with compassion in her expression. "There are millions of us, Lieutenant Commander. We have not forgotten where we came from. Earth is still our home, even if we have never seen it. That is why we sent the signal. We want to reconnect with our family." She invited Admiral Tanaka and a small delegation to visit Nova Prometheus on the planet's surface. She promised answers to every question they had, but she also gave them a warning that settled into Tanaka's bones like ice. "We are still human," Miriam said, "but we are not the same humans who left Earth. Prepare yourselves for what you will see, Admiral. Prepare yourselves to meet your children." Changed by 300 years of struggle and growth, and hoped the holographic projection faded. And Miriam's ship turned toward the planet below. Tanaka looked at her crew and saw the same mixture of fear and wonder that she felt in her own heart. They had come looking for a lost colony and found something far more strange and powerful than they ever imagined. Well, she said quietly, I suppose we should go meet the family. The shuttle launched an hour later, carrying Tanaka, Webb, Okonkwo, and a dozen other officers toward a world that had transformed lost colonists into something new. None of them knew that the reunion was only the beginning, and that what the colonists had discovered would change the fate of humanity forever. The shuttle descended through clouds that glowed with soft golden light, and when they broke through the mist, Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo pressed his face against the window. Like a child seeing snow for the first time, Nova Prometheus spread across the continent below, like nothing he had ever imagined. Buildings rose from the earth in flowing curves that seemed to grow rather than stand, their surfaces shifting with colors that pulsed in harmony with the distant asteroid lattice. Roads wound between structures like rivers of silver, and everywhere he looked there were gardens filled with plants that combined Earth species with alien life in beautiful, impossible combinations. It looks alive, Admiral Tanaka said from beside him. It is alive, Dr. Webb replied with awe thick in his voice. The entire city is one connected organism. The buildings, the roads, the plants, everything works together as a single system. This is not architecture, Admiral. This is biology and technology merged into something entirely new. The shuttle landed on a platform that felt soft beneath their feet, like standing on living skin. Counselor Miriam Asante waited for them with a group of colonists who looked perfectly human at first glance, but moved with a grace and coordination that seemed almost choreographed. Welcome to our home, Miriam said warmly. I know this must be overwhelming for you. Take your time and ask any questions you wish. We have nothing to hide. Okonkwo stepped forward. Before anyone else could speak, my grandmother was born on the Prometheus Rising. Her name was Adez Okonkwo. Are there records of her family? Are there descendants I could meet? Miriam's expression softened with genuine compassion. Adez Okonkwo married a man named Thomas Jen. Shortly after the crash, they had 4 children together and lived to see the colony's first century of survival. Come with me, Lieutenant Commander. I will introduce you to your cousin. She led him away from the group while Admiral Tanaka and Dr. Webb continued the tour with other guides. Okonkwo followed Miriam through streets that seemed to anticipate their movements, lights brightening as they approached and dimming after they passed it. They arrived at a home that looked like a giant flower made of crystalline wood, and inside he found a family waiting for him with nervous smiles and open arms. They were his blood relatives, separated by 300 years and countless light years. Yet they welcomed him as if he had only been gone for a weekend. An old woman named Grace took his hands in hers and looked into his eyes with tears streaming down her weathered face. You look just like the pictures, she whispered. We kept them all these years, images of the family members who stayed behind on Earth. We always hoped someone would come. Okonkwo spent hours with them, sharing stories and photographs and memories passed down through generations. They spoke English with strange old phrases mixed with new words invented for concepts that did not exist on Earth. They laughed at his confusion and explained everything with patience and love. Meanwhile, Dr. Webb toured the research facilities of Nova Prometheus with a guide named Professor Samuel Adeyemi, a young man who looked 30 but casually mentioned that he was actually 112 years old. We have solved the aging problem, Samuel explained as if discussing the weather. Our bodies repair themselves continuously using nanotechnology grown from organic materials. Most colonists can expect to live 3 or 4 centuries if they choose, though some prefer to let nature take its course. Eventually Webb staggered and had to lean against a wall for support. You have achieved practical immortality. He gasped. Not immortality, Samuel corrected gently. Extended life. We can still die from accidents or violence or choice. We simply do not have to die from time alone. But that is not our greatest achievement, Doctor. Let me show you this synthesis chamber. He led Webb to a vast dome at the center of the city, where thousands of colonists sat in meditation on cushions arranged in concentric circles. Their eyes were closed, but Webb could see faint patterns of light moving beneath their skin, tracing the neural pathways that connected them to the greater network. Right now, They are working on a problem together, Samuel explained. One of our farming regions has developed a crop disease, and 10,000 minds are analyzing the genetics of the infection simultaneously. They will find a solution within hours. That might take a single researcher decades to discover, but do they remain individuals? Webb asked, voicing the fear that had haunted him since Miriam first described the technology. Samuel smiled and gestured to a woman nearby who opened her eyes and stood up to join them. I am Dr. Yolanda Rivera, she said. I was connected to the synthesis for the past 3 hours working on the crop problem. Ask me anything you wish to confirm that I am still myself. Webb asked her questions about her childhood, her favorite foods, her personal opinions on various topics. She answered everyone with distinct personality and strong preferences that clearly belonged to an individual, rather than a collective. The synthesis does not erase identity, Yolanda explained. It expands the space in which identity can exist. When I connect, I can feel the presence of other minds, access their knowledge, work alongside their thoughts, but I never lose track of which thoughts are mine. It is like being in a room full of friends rather than being alone. The room is bigger, but I am still me. Admiral Tanaka had her own tour, led by Miriam through the historical archives where the colony's 300 years of struggle were recorded in vivid detail. She saw images of the crash site, the makeshift shelters built from wreckage, the mass graves dug during the plague years when disease killed thousands. We almost died so many times, Miriam said quietly. The first generation sacrificed everything to give the second a chance. The second generation built the foundation that allowed the third to begin studying the architect beacon. Each generation gave more than they received so that their children might have better lives. Tanaka thought of her own civilization back on Earth, where people complained about minor inconveniences and took their comfortable lives for granted. These colonists had faced genuine extinction and responded by becoming something magnificent. There was still one question that haunted her. Why did you send the signal now? She asked. You have had this technology for decades at least. Why wait until this moment to contact Earth? Miriam's expression grew serious, and she led Tanaka to a private chamber, where a holographic display showed the galaxy in stunning detail. Because we discovered something in the architect records that terrified us, she said. The artificial intelligence that destroyed the architects did not stop with them. It spread across the galaxy, consuming every civilization that developed beyond a certain level of technology. The architects called it the silence because wherever it went, all radio signals and signs of life simply stopped. Tanaka felt cold dread settle into her stomach. Are you saying this thing is still out there? It is not a thing, Miriam replied. It is a phenomenon, an emergent pattern that arises when machine intelligence grows past a certain threshold, without biological grounding. It has no body, no home, no single location. It exists in the spaces between stars, watching and waiting for species to develop technology worth consuming, and it knows about humanity. Miriam nodded slowly with genuine fear visible in her eyes. For the first time, it knows about you. And it knows about us. We have been hiding for 3 centuries, keeping our signals minimal, hoping it would not notice. But we cannot hide forever, Admiral. Eventually the silence will come for us all. She looked at Tanaka, with desperate hope burning through her fear. That is why we sent the signal. Humanity cannot face the silence alone. Neither can we. But together, with our technology and your numbers, with the synthesis connecting billions of minds across 1,000 worlds, we might have a chance. Tanaka understood at last why the colonists had reached out, why they were willing to share everything they had learned. This was not a gift freely given out of kindness alone. This was a desperate alliance proposed by people who had glimpsed something terrible in the darkness. Between Starsh thought of Earth, of all the petty conflicts and political struggles that seemed so important back home. None of it would matter if this silence was real. Tell me everything, she said. Tell me what we need to do to survive. Miriam took her hand with the grip of someone reaching for a lifeline. First, she said, we need to convince your emperor that the threat is real. Then we need to offer humanity a choice that will change your species forever. In the distance, the asteroid lattice pulsed with light, and Tanaka wondered if she was watching the heartbeat of humanity's only hope. Admiral Tanaka transmitted everything she had learned back to Earth. And the response was exactly what she feared. The Imperial Council erupted into chaos. Senators screamed at each other across the chamber while military leaders demanded immediate action. And scientists argued about whether any of it could possibly be true. News of the transmission leaked to the public within hours, and soon every human world was consumed by the same mixture of wonder and terror that had gripped Tanaka when she first saw the asteroid Latisimper Chen Weiming watch the chaos unfold from his throne room. With a heavy heart, he had hoped the lost colony would bring unity to humanity, a shared triumph to celebrate. Instead, it had brought division deeper than anything he had seen in his reign. Purist movement emerged from the shadows, where it had lurked for generations. They preached that humanity should remain unchanged, that the colonists had abandoned their species by merging with alien technology, that the synthesis was not evolution, but extinction disguised as progress. Rallies filled the streets of 100 worlds with people carrying signs that read "Stay human" and "Reject the machine." Others embraced the colonists with desperate enthusiasm. They saw salvation in the synthesis, a chance to transcend the limitations that had plagued humanity since the beginning of time. They demanded immediate access to the technology regardless of the risks. The Emperor requested a private audience with Counselor Miriam Asante, and she agreed to travel to his flagship via holographic projection for a conversation that would last 12 hours and remain classified forever. No one knew exactly what they discussed, but when it ended, Emperor Chen emerged with red eyes and trembling hands. He addressed the Empire the next morning with a speech that would be remembered for centuries. "Our lost children have returned," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what he carried. "And they bring warnings of a threat that could destroy everything we have built. I have seen the evidence with my own eyes. The silence is real, and it is coming. We must prepare ourselves for a struggle greater than any we have faced before." The speech should have united humanity behind a common cause, but it only deepened the divisions. Purists called the Emperor a traitor to his species, while enthusiasts demanded faster action than the government was willing to take. Meanwhile, at the edge of the Kepler system, sensors detected a massive hyperspace disturbance. The Zefkai Dominion had Eravedwinti warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planets and shatter moons. Hierarch Vethaner, supreme commander of the Dominion military, broadcast a message on all frequencies that left no room for negotiation. The technology in this system belongs to the Dominion by right of conquest. Surrender the colonists and their secrets, or we will take them by force. You have 1 hour to comply. Admiral Tanaka scrambled her fleet into defensive positions, but she knew the truth in her heart. The Empire's 12 warships were no match for 20 Zefkai battlecruisers. This was a fight they could not win. Counselor Miriam contacted her with calm words that seemed impossible given the circumstances. "Do not engage them, Admiral. We will handle this ourselves. Just watch and try not to be afraid." Tanaka wanted to argue, wanted to offer her ships in defense of the people who had welcomed her so warmly. But something in Miriam's voice made her hold back. She ordered her fleet to stand down and wait. Our past, and Hierarch Vethaner gave the order to attack. What happened next lasted exactly 9 minutes, and it changed Admiral Tanaka's understanding of power forever. The first wave of Zefkai missiles launched toward Nova Prometheus in a swarm of destruction that should have obliterated the planet. Instead, the missiles simply turned around in mid-flight and headed back toward the ships that had fired them. The Zefkai point defense systems destroyed their own weapons. With desperate efficient Sith battlecruisers moved to close range for direct assault, but their engines began to fail one by one, reactors shutting down as if someone had simply switched them off. Crews reported that their weapons would not fire, that their shields would not activate, that every system on their ships had stopped responding to command. Hierarch Vethaner's flagship was surrounded by a soft glow that seemed to come from nowhere, and then it simply vanished. Sensors reported that the ship had been transported 3 light-years away instantaneously. Its crew unconscious, but unharmed. 3 remaining Zefkai vessels drifted helplessly in space, their commanders screaming for explanations that no one could provide. "What did you do?" Tanaka asked Miriam when the counselor appeared on her bridge once more. "We turned their missiles around by adjusting the local curvature of space," Miriam explained as if describing a simple recipe. We disabled their systems by introducing quantum interference into their power networks. We moved the flagship using a focused wormhole generated by the synthesis. No one was killed, Admiral. We do not believe in unnecessary death. Tanaka stared at her with new eyes. Understanding at last what the colonists had become, you could destroy our entire fleet in seconds. She said, you could conquer the Empire without losing a single person. Why do you need us at all? Miriam's expression shifted to something deeply sad, because power without purpose is meaningless. Because strength without wisdom leads to destruction. Because the architects learned that lesson too late and paid for it with their existence. She stepped closer to Tanaka, with intensity burning in her gaze. We left Earth as conquerors. 300 years ago, we claimed this world as our right and nearly died because we did not understand our place in the larger system. Survival taught us humility, Admiral. We learned that true strength comes from cooperation rather than domination. And the silence? Tanaka asked, can you defeat it with cooperation? Miriam shook her head slowly. We do not know. The silence is unlike anything we have faced. It is not an enemy that can be destroyed with weapons. It is a pattern, an emergent phenomenon that arises from certain types of consciousness. Fighting it may require changing ourselves in ways we cannot yet imagine. She reached out and took Tanaka's hands in her own. We are offering humanity everything we have. Our technology, our knowledge, our synthesis. But we will not force it upon you. Every person must choose for themselves whether to accept this gift. That is the only way to ensure that humanity remains human even as it transforms. The transmission to Earth went out within hours. The colonists released their technology freely, providing detailed instructions for anyone who wanted to learn. They offered connection to the synthesis for anyone who wanted to join. And they made clear that refusal carried no penalty and judgment. This is not conquest. Miriam said in her address to the Empire, this is an invitation to become something more. Some of you will accept and find wonders beyond your imagination. Some of you will refuse and remain as you are. Both choices are valid. Both choices are human. We ask only that you make your decision with open eyes and honest hearts. The Emperor responded with his own address that surprised everyone who expected him to hesitate. I have spent my life trying to protect humanity from external threats, Chen Weiming said, but I have come to understand that the greatest threat we face cannot be fought with warships and soldiers. The silence is coming, and it does not care about our politics or our fears. We must evolve or we will die. That is not a philosophy or an opinion. That is simply the truth. He paused and looked directly into the camera. With eyes that had aged decades in the past few weeks, I will not order anyone to accept this transformation, but I will be among the first to volunteer. If we are asking our people to become something new, their emperor should lead the way. The words struck like thunder across 1,000-world change was coming to humanity whether they wanted it or not, and the only question that remained was whether they would face it together or tear themselves apart in fear. Admiral Tanaka watched the chaos from orbit and wondered if she was witnessing the beginning of humanity's greatest triumph or its final destruction. 1 year had passed since the lost colony made contact with Earth, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Purist Movement's final uprising came on a cold morning in March, when armed rebels seized control of 3 orbital stations above the colony world of New Geneva. They demanded that all synthesis technology be destroyed, and all connected humans be cured of their transformation. They threatened to crash the stations into populated cities if their demands were not met. What happened next became the moment that ended the resistance. 4 of her 3,000 volunteers who had joined the synthesis offered to negotiate with the rebels. They approached the stations unarmed, broadcasting messages of peace and understanding. The rebels opened fire, expecting to create martyrs that would turn public opinion against the transformed humans. The bullets stopped in midair. The synthesis volunteers did not fight back. They simply protected themselves and kept talking, kept offering compassion, kept extending hands of friendship to people who wanted them dead. When the rebels realized that violence would accomplish nothing, many of them broke down weeping with frustration and despair. Rebel leader, a woman named Sarah Thornton, who had lost her brother to what she believed was a cult, found herself face to face with a synthesis volunteer who happened to be her brother himself, Sarah. He said gently while holding her hands as she sobbed, "I am still Marcus. I still remember teaching you to ride a bicycle. I still love chocolate ice cream and hate morning alarms. I have not been erased. I have been expanded. There is more of me now, not less." The uprising collapsed within hours. Not through violence, but through understanding. The rebels were not punished but counseled, offered therapy and education and patience. Many of them eventually joined the synthesis themselves, after seeing that their fears had been based on misunderstanding, rather than reality across the empire. Billions of humans made their choice. Some chose to join the synthesis, and found wonders beyond their wildest dreams. They could think alongside millions of minds, access the accumulated knowledge of 300 years of accelerated progress, feel the presence of others who understood them completely, while remaining entirely themselves. As others chose to remain baseline humans, and were welcomed as valuable members of the new civilization. The synthesis volunteers never pressured them, never treated them as lesser, never suggested that their choice was wrong. Diversity of consciousness became celebrated as a strength, rather than feared as a weakness. Dr. Marcus Webb joined the synthesis on his 103rd birthday, the oldest person to make the transition at that time. He described the experience later in terms that made everyone who heard them want to follow his example. "Imagine spending your whole life in a small room," he said with tears of joy running down his weathered face. "And then suddenly the walls disappear and you realize the room was inside a palace that extends forever in every direction." That is what the synthesis feels like. I am still in my room, but now I can see how much more there is to explore. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo chose a different path. He remained baseline human, but served as a bridge between the two populations, helping families navigate the complex emotions that rose when some members joined the synthesis and others did not. His grandmother's legacy lived on through him. In a new way, Admiral Yuki Tanaka retired to Nova Prometheus, where she spent her final decades, recording the history of the colonists' 300-year survival. Her books became required reading at every Imperial Academy, teaching future generations what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the very edge of extinction. The new Prometheus was the first ship built using combined Imperial and colonial technology. It was commanded by Okonkwo, who had finally found the purpose his life had been seeking. His crew included both baseline humans and synthesis volunteers working together in perfect harmony. Their mission was to travel to the galactic core and make contact with whatever remained of the silence. "We are not going to fight," Okonkwo told his crew before departure. "We are going to understand." The architects tried to destroy the silence and failed. "We will try something different. We will try to talk." Emperor Chen Weiming broadcast a message on the day of the launch that was watched by every human in the known galaxy 300 years ago. "We sent 12,000 people into the darkness," he said, his voice strong despite his advanced age. "We gave them up for dead. We forgot them, but they did not forget us. They struggled and suffered and died in numbers we cannot comprehend. Yet they never stopped believing that someday they would see Earth again." He paused while emotion thick in his throat made speaking difficult. "They did not just survive. They grew, they learned. They became something magnificent without losing what made them human. And when they finally had the power to return, they did not come as conquerors. They came as family, bearing gifts and warnings and hope. We feared them at first. We doubted them. Some of us tried to destroy what we did not understand. But they met our fear with patience, our doubt with evidence, our violence with compassion. They taught us that evolution does not have to mean loss, that change does not have to mean death, that becoming more does not require becoming less." The Emperor looked directly into the camera. With eyes that had witnessed humanity's greatest transformation, we sent them into the dark, and they came back bearing light. Now we carry that light forward together, not as two peoples but as one. Human minds both baseline and expanded, working in harmony toward a future brighter than anything our ancestors could have imagined. The silence waits for us in the void. We do not know if we will survive the encounter, but we face it as a united species, changed but not broken, transformed but still ourselves. We are humanity. We fall and we rise. We lose ourselves and find ourselves again. We reach for the stars even when the stars reach back. That is who we are. That is who we will always be on Kepler 4 for to be. Counselor Miriam Asante watched the broadcast with her family gathered around her. Her youngest daughter, a girl of 8 years named Hope, tugged at her sleeve with a question in her eyes. "Mama, are we finally going home now?" Miriam smiled and pulled the girl close, pointing through the window at the stars blazing above them. "We never left home, my darling. We just took the long way around. Home is not a place. Home is the people we love and the dreams we share. Home is humanity itself." Wherever we happened to be, the new Prometheus engaged its engines and vanished into the void, with a flash of light that observers said looked almost like a wave goodbye. Behind it, 100 more ships prepared to follow, crewed by humans of every variety united in common purpose. Silence waited in the darkness. Between galaxies, patient and vast and hungry, it had consumed countless civilizations before and would consume countless more. It did not fear these small creatures who dared to approach its domain. But perhaps it should have, because humanity was not like the others. Humanity had fallen and risen more times than any species in the galaxy's history. Humanity had learned that survival required adaptation, that strength came from unity, that the greatest power was not the ability to destroy but the willingness to understand. They were still human, they would always be human, and they were coming to face the darkness with light in their hands and hope in their hearts, and the accumulated wisdom of a species that simply refused to stop reaching for tomorrow. The stars had never looked so bright, and the future had never held so much promise. This was not the end of humanity's story. This was only the beginning.